The space around Kepler mining station buzzed with activity as ships moved into position. Commander Zethkar watched his display screen from the bridge of the Alterian cruiser Starwing. Red dots showed enemy ships approaching from the outer system. Blue dots showed his own fleet spread out in defensive formation. Another Vorkanian raid, his weapons officer said with a tired voice. Third one this month, Zethkar nodded. The Vorkanians always attacked the same way. They would come in fast, hit the outer defenses, steal what cargo they could grab, then run away before the main fleet arrived. It was almost like a dance that both sides knew by heart. Lieutenant Jake Collins stood at the back of the bridge watching everything with sharp eyes. The human wore a simple gray uniform with observer patches on his shoulders. He was supposed to be here to learn how other species fought battles. Most of the crew forgot he was even there. Jake studied the tactical display with growing concern. Something felt wrong about this attack. The Vorkanian ships were moving differently than usual. Instead of hitting hard and fast, they were spreading out in a wide circle around the mining station. Captain Murphy to Starwing, came a voice over the radio. This is Liberty Dawn requesting permission to move to forward position. Zethkar looked at his communications officer. Tell the human ship to maintain rearguard position. Standard protocols. Jake wanted to speak up, but he kept quiet. He was just an observer. His job was to watch and learn, not give advice. But his military training told him something was very wrong with this battle. The Vorkanian ships opened fire with their usual energy weapons. Bright blue beams shot across space toward the Coalition fleet. The Alterian shields absorbed most of the damage easily. Other ships in the formation did the same thing they always did. They fired back with careful, measured shots. Shields down to 80%, the shield operator reported. Begin shield rotation, Zethkar ordered. Weapons, return fire at half power. This was how space battles worked in the galaxy. Ships would exchange fire until one side's shields dropped to 40%. Then that side would retreat and regroup. No one wanted to actually destroy ships and kill crews. That would be wasteful and barbaric. Jake watched the enemy formation on the screen. The red dots were not behaving like raiders. Real raiders would hit the strongest ships first, trying to break through quickly. These ships were moving in a pattern that made no sense for a quick raid. Sir, Jake said quietly to Zethkar. The enemy formation looks strange. Zethkar glanced at the human. How so, observer? They are not trying to break through our line. They are pushing us toward the mining station. The Alterian commander looked at his screen again. They are probing for weak spots. Standard raider tactics, Jake bit his tongue. He could see what was happening, but no one would listen to him. The Vorkanians were slowly herding the entire Coalition fleet closer to the mining station. Every time the fleet moved to intercept one group of raiders, another group would appear and force them to adjust position. The battle continued for 2 hours. Ships fired at each other with polite precision. When a ship's shields dropped too low, it would pull back and let its shields recharge. The Vorkanians seemed content to keep up this slow dance. Enemy ships are withdrawing, the sensor operator announced. Jake watched the red dots on the screen pull back to a safe distance. This should have been the end of the engagement. The Vorkanians would normally jump to hyperspace now and escape with whatever they had stolen. But they did not leave. Sir, they are maintaining position at the edge of sensor range, the sensor officer reported. Zethkar frowned. This was not normal behavior. Perhaps they are waiting for reinforcements to arrive. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If the Vorkanians were waiting for reinforcements, that meant this was not a simple raid. This was something much bigger. He looked at the tactical display again. The Coalition fleet was now positioned exactly where the Vorkanians wanted them. Close to the mining station, with their backs to the large reactor cores that powered the facility. Commander, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady, I think we should move the fleet away from the station. Why would we do that? Zethkar asked. Our job is to protect the miners. Yes, sir, but our current position makes us vulnerable to... Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The sensor operator's face went pale as he stared at his instruments. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, he announced. Large ships dropping out of hyperspace all around us. The main display screen lit up with dozens of new red dots. Vorkanian warships appeared in space around the Coalition fleet. Big ships, battle cruisers and heavy destroyers. The kind of ships used for major military operations, not simple raids. Jake's worst fears came true. The small raider force had been bait. They had lured the Coalition fleet into a trap. positioning them exactly where the main Vorkanian battle group wanted them. By the ancient stars, Zethkar whispered. How many ships? 47 enemy vessels confirmed, the sensor operator reported. More still arriving. The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what was happening. They were surrounded and outnumbered 5-1. The mining station sat behind them with 3,000 civilian workers aboard. There was nowhere to run. Jake looked at the tactical display one more time. The Vorkanians had played this perfectly. They had used the Coalition's own protective instincts against them. Every move the fleet had made to defend the mining station had moved them deeper into the trap. Open a channel to Captain Murphy on the Liberty Dawn, Jake said to the communications officer. Zethkar nodded absently, still staring at the overwhelming enemy force surrounding them. Liberty Dawn here, came Captain Murphy's voice. Captain, this is Lieutenant Collins. Do you see what I see? There was a pause before Murphy replied. I see it, Jake. We are in deep trouble. Jake wished he could do more than just observe. His hands itched to take action, but he was just one human on an alien ship. He could only watch as the trap closed around them and hope that someone would figure out a way to save those 3,000 miners before it was too late. The familiar battle had become something much more dangerous. And Jake had the sinking feeling that it was about to get much worse. The Vorkanian fleet commander's voice filled every ship's communication system. His words were calm and polite, spoken in perfect galactic standard language. Coalition vessels, you are surrounded and outnumbered. We do not wish unnecessary bloodshed. Power down your weapons and prepare for boarding. You will be treated according to galactic prisoner protocols. Commander Zethkar looked around his bridge. His crew waited for orders, but everyone knew the situation was hopeless. 47 enemy ships surrounded 12 coalition vessels. The math was simple and brutal. Sir, his first officer said quietly, we should begin surrender procedures. Jake Collins watched this exchange with growing horror. These aliens were going to give up without a real fight. He had seen this kind of civilized warfare before during his time observing other species. They treated battle like a business transaction. When the odds became too bad, you simply surrendered and hoped for prisoner exchange later. But Jake's military training told him something was wrong. He studied the Vorkanian formation on the tactical display. The enemy ships were not positioned for a prisoner operation. They were arranged for something much worse. Commander Zethkar, Jake said urgently, look at their weapon signatures. The Alterian commander glanced at his displays. All enemy ships have charged weapons. Standard procedure for accepting surrender. No, sir, Jake insisted. Look at what they are aiming at. Zethkar frowned and called up a detailed scan. His face went pale when he saw the targeting data. The Vorkanian heavy cruisers had their main plasma cannons aimed directly at the mining station's life support sections. That makes no sense, Zethkar said. Targeting civilians violates every galactic warfare convention. Jake felt sick to his stomach. Sir, I do not think they care about conventions anymore. On the communications channel, the Vorkanian commander spoke again. You have 5 minutes to power down weapons and lower shields. Any delay will result in unfortunate consequences for the mining facility. Captain Murphy's voice crackled over the radio from the Liberty Dawn. Fleet Command, this is Murphy. Request permission to break formation and engage enemy forces. Negative, Liberty Dawn, came the reply from the lead coalition ship. All vessels will comply with surrender protocols. This is a direct order. Jake grabbed the communications microphone before anyone could stop him. Captain Murphy, this is Jake Collins. Check your tactical sensors. Look at what they are really aiming at. There was silence for several long seconds. Then Murphy's voice came back, tight with anger. I see it. Those plasma cannons are not pointed at our ships. What are you humans talking about? Zethkar demanded. Jake pointed at the tactical display.
Sir, those heavy weapons are aimed at the civilian quarters of the mining station.
They plan to destroy it during the surrender process and blame it on crossfire. The bridge crew stared at the screen in shock. Zethkar ran the targeting calculations twice to make sure. The plasma cannons were indeed locked onto the mining station's most vulnerable areas filled with sleeping families and civilian workers. But that would be murder, the weapons officer whispered. Yes, Jake said grimly. Mass murder disguised as an accident. The Vorkanian commander's voice returned. 3 minutes remaining. We are detecting unusual energy readings from your formation. Do not attempt any hostile actions. Jake realized the enemy was monitoring the coalition ship's power levels. They would know immediately if anyone tried to charge weapons or raise additional shields. All ships begin shutdown procedures, came the order from Fleet Command. Repeat, all ships power down weapons and prepare for boarding. Jake watched in frustration as the coalition vessels began following orders. One by one, the blue dots on his screen went dark as ships powered down their weapons. Only one ship kept its systems active, the Liberty Dawn. Captain Murphy's voice came over a private channel to the Star Wing. Jake, are you certain about their intentions? Jake looked at the tactical data one more time. The Vorkanians had positioned their ships perfectly for the massacre. Heavy cruisers aimed at the mining station. Fast destroyers ready to eliminate any coalition ship that tried to intervene. Battle cruisers positioned to block escape routes. Yes, ma'am, Jake replied. They are going to kill everyone. Fleet Command to Liberty Dawn, came an angry voice. You are ordered to comply with shutdown procedures immediately. Murphy's reply was calm and steady. Negative, Fleet Command. I am declaring an emergency situation under Article 12 of the Human Defense Protocols. Jake had never heard of Article 12, but he could guess what it meant. Captain Murphy was taking independent action to protect civilian lives. Liberty Dawn, you will stand down or face court-martial, Fleet Command threatened. Copy that, Murphy replied. Jake, can you get to my ship? Jake looked at Commander Zethkar. The Altarian was staring at his screens with growing understanding of what was about to happen. Go, Zethkar said quietly. If you humans can save those miners, then go. Jake nodded and ran toward the hangar bay. He grabbed an emergency transport pod and launched toward the Liberty Dawn. As his small pod crossed the space between ships, he could see the Vorkanian vessels holding position like hungry predators. The mining station sat in the middle of everything, completely helpless. 3,000 people who had no idea they were about to die in a few minutes. Jake's transport pod docked with the Liberty Dawn just as the 5-minute deadline expired. He ran onto the bridge to find Captain Murphy and her crew preparing for battle. Jake, Murphy said without looking up from her controls, I hope you have some ideas. Because we are about to take on 47 enemy ships with one small frigate. Jake looked at the tactical display on Murphy's bridge. The human ship's sensors were much more detailed than the alien systems. He could see exactly where every enemy ship was positioned and what weapons they carried. Captain, he said slowly, I do not think we can save everyone, but maybe we can save some of them. Murphy finally looked at him. What do you need? Full tactical control and permission to do whatever is necessary. Murphy nodded. You have it. Jake sat down at the weapons console and began entering commands. His hands moved quickly over the controls as he prepared the Liberty Dawn for the kind of battle the galaxy had never seen before. A human battle. Jake Collins ran his hands over the weapon controls of the Liberty Dawn, while Captain Murphy watched him work. The bridge was quiet except for the hum of the ship's systems and the distant chatter of surrender negotiations on the radio. Jake, Murphy said quietly, before we do this, I need to know who you really are. Jake kept working on the targeting system while he answered. Lieutenant Jake Collins, Earth Defense Force, Special Operations Division. Former commando, current intelligence analyst specializing in alien warfare tactics. Murphy raised an eyebrow. You are not just an observer. No, ma'am. I have been studying how other species fight for the past 2 years. Learning their weaknesses, finding ways to counter their strategies. Jake looked up from his console. The problem is that every other species in the galaxy fights the same way. Polite, careful, civilized. And humans fight differently? Jake nodded grimly. We fight to win, no matter what it costs. On the main screen, they could see the Vorkanian heavy cruisers adjusting their aim toward the mining station. The plasma cannons were almost fully charged. In less than 2 minutes, 3,000 civilians would be dead. What is your plan? Murphy asked. Jake pulled up a detailed scan of the enemy formation. Captain, what do you know about your ship's fusion drive system? Murphy looked confused. Standard civilian-grade fusion engines. Nothing special. Why? Because they are not standard, Jake said with a slight smile. I helped design the Liberty Dawn's power systems. Those fusion drives can be overloaded to produce 10 times their normal output. That would destroy the ship. Yes, ma'am. But not immediately. We would have about 15 minutes before the drives exploded. Murphy stared at him. You want to turn my ship into a bomb? I want to turn your ship into something the Vorkanians have never seen before. A weapon that does not follow their rules. Jake's fingers moved quickly over the tactical display, highlighting enemy ships. Every species in the galaxy fights the same way. They target shields first, then engines, then weapons. They try to disable ships without killing crews. They retreat when their shields drop below safe levels. Murphy was starting to understand. But humans do not fight that way. No, ma'am. When human lives are at stake, we target anything we can hit. We do not retreat when shields fail. We do not follow polite rules of engagement. Jake met her eyes. We fight until we win or die trying. The radio crackled with the Vorkanian commander's voice. Final warning to all coalition vessels. Any ship that does not comply with shutdown orders will be destroyed. Murphy made her decision. Do it. Jake's hands flew over the controls. He began overloading the fusion drives while simultaneously charging every weapon on the ship. The Liberty Dawn's power system screamed warnings as energy levels climbed far beyond safe limits. All coalition ships, this is Liberty Dawn, Murphy announced on the general channel. We are breaking formation to engage enemy forces. Recommend you protect the mining station evacuation shuttles. Liberty Dawn, you are ordered to stand down immediately, Fleet Command shouted back. Murphy switched off the radio. Jake, we are committed now. What do you need from me? Evasive maneuvers on my mark. Do not worry about our shields. Do not retreat no matter how much damage we take. Jake locked onto his first target. And Captain? When I tell you to ram something, do not hesitate. Murphy gripped her command chair. Understood. The Liberty Dawn suddenly accelerated toward the Vorkanian fleet at maximum speed. Every alien ship in the area detected the human vessel's aggressive approach. Warning messages flooded the communications channels. Human vessel, alter course immediately or you will be fired upon, the Vorkanian commander warned. Jake did not respond. Instead, he opened fire on the nearest enemy destroyer with everything the Liberty Dawn had. Pulse cannons, missile launchers, and plasma beams all fired at once, targeting the destroyer's engine section. The alien ship's shields absorbed most of the damage, but Jake was not trying to break through their shields. He was targeting their engine mounts and maneuvering thrusters, systems that other species considered too small to waste ammunition on. The destroyer lost attitude control and began spinning helplessly. Jake immediately switched targets to the next ship, firing at sensor arrays and communication dishes instead of main hull sections. What are you doing? Murphy asked as she watched Jake's unusual targeting choices. I am not trying to destroy their ships, Jake explained while firing at another enemy vessel. I am making them helpless, blind, unable to coordinate with each other. The Vorkanian fleet began returning fire, but they aimed their weapons at the Liberty Dawn's main hull and shield generators. Standard targeting doctrine. They were trying to disable the human ship politely. Jake was not being polite in return. He targeted engine cooling systems, gravity generators, life support relays, and weapon power couplings. Every shot was aimed at something the aliens considered too unimportant to heavily shield. One by one, Vorkanian ships began losing essential systems. They could not maneuver properly. Their weapons misfired. Their sensors gave false readings. Some ships lost artificial gravity, leaving their crews floating helplessly. Impossible, came the confused voice of the Vorkanian commander. How is one small ship doing this much damage? Jake switched targets again, this time aiming at the heavy cruiser that threatened the mining station. But instead of targeting its weapons, he aimed at the ship's computer core and navigation systems. The massive cruiser's plasma cannons fired wildly in the wrong direction as its targeting computers failed. The deadly beams meant for the mining station shot harmlessly into empty space. Jake, Murphy said with growing excitement, this is working. Yes, ma'am, but we are running out of time. Jake looked at the power readings from their overloaded fusion drives. 12 minutes until core breach. Murphy nodded and began evasive maneuvers as more enemy ships turned to engage them. The Liberty Dawn dodged between larger vessels, using its smaller size and Jake's unconventional tactics to stay ahead of enemy fire. Jake continued his systematic destruction of alien ship systems. He hit communication relays to isolate enemy commanders. He destroyed sensor pallets to blind enemy gunners. He targeted docking bay doors to trap enemy fighters inside their launch bays. The Vorkanian formation began to fall apart as ships lost the ability to coordinate with each other. Some vessels collided as their navigation systems failed. Others fired on their own allies by mistake when their targeting computers malfunctioned. "This is madness," the Vorkanian commander's voice came over the radio. "You are fighting like savages." Jake smiled grimly as he locked onto his next target. "No, sir, we are fighting like humans." The Liberty Dawn raced through the Vorkanian formation like an angry wasp, leaving disabled ships spinning in its wake. Jake Collins worked at the weapon controls with deadly efficiency, his hands moving faster than Captain Murphy had ever seen anyone operate a tactical system. 10 minutes until core breach, Murphy announced, watching their overloaded fusion drives climb toward critical failure. Jake nodded without taking his eyes off his targets. He had just finished destroying the sensor array on another heavy cruiser when something caught his attention. The Vorkanian flagship was moving toward the mining station. "Captain, the command ship is trying to finish the job manually," Jake said. "They are going to ram the station." Murphy looked at her display. The massive Vorkanian battleship was indeed moving toward the mining facility. Its plasma cannons were offline thanks to Jake's earlier attack, but a ship that size would not need weapons to destroy the station. "Can we intercept?" Murphy asked. Jake ran quick calculations in his head. "Not with conventional tactics. We are too small and they have too much momentum." Murphy gripped her command chair tighter. "Then we use unconventional tactics." Jake smiled. This was why he liked working with humans. Other species would see an impossible situation and give up. Humans saw an impossible situation and got creative. "Captain, I need you to put us on a collision course with their flagship." Murphy did not hesitate. Collision course set. The Liberty Dawn changed direction and accelerated directly toward the Vorkanian command ship. It was like a tiny fighter charging at a massive fortress. But Jake had learned something important during his 2 years studying alien warfare. Size did not always matter. "All weapons, concentrate fire on their bridge section," Jake ordered. "Not their shields, not their hull. Target their command center specifically." Pulse cannons and missile launchers focused their fire on the flagship's nerve center. The Vorkanian commander's voice came over the radio, angry and confused. "Human vessel, you cannot seriously intend to ram us. You will be destroyed instantly." Jake keyed his own microphone. "Sir, you still do not understand how humans fight." The flagship's defensive guns turned toward the Liberty Dawn, but Jake had spent months studying Vorkanian weapon systems. He knew exactly how long it took their heavy guns to rotate and acquire new targets. "Evasive pattern Delta," he told Murphy. "Stay inside their turning radius." The Liberty Dawn danced around the massive enemy ship, staying too close for the big guns to track it effectively. Jake continued firing at the flagship's bridge, communications equipment, and sensor arrays. 8 minutes to core breach, Murphy announced. Jake looked at his tactical display one more time. Most of the Vorkanian fleet was disabled or confused. Ships drifted helplessly with damaged engines. Others fired randomly with broken targeting systems. A few had collided with each other when their navigation computers failed, but the flagship was still moving toward the mining station. In 6 minutes it would collide with the facility and kill everyone aboard. "Captain," Jake said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "I lied about the fusion drive overload." Murphy looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "The drives will not explode in 8 minutes. They will explode when I trigger them manually." Jake met her eyes. "And I am going to trigger them when we hit that flagship." Murphy understood immediately. Jake was planning to sacrifice both their lives to stop the enemy command ship. It was a tactical decision based on cold mathematics. 2 human lives versus 3,000 civilian lives. "There has to be another way," Murphy said. Jake shook his head. "Not with the time we have left? That flagship has to be stopped, and we are the only ship in position to do it." Murphy was quiet for a moment as she watched the massive enemy ship growing larger on their screen. Finally, she keyed her microphone to broadcast on all channels. "All coalition ships, this is Captain Lisa Murphy of the Liberty Dawn. We are about to demonstrate why you never threaten human civilians." Jake prepared the fusion drive overload sequence while Murphy held their ship on course for the flagship's command section. The Vorkanian ship's defensive guns finally managed to lock onto them and began firing. The Liberty Dawn's shields collapsed under the heavy enemy fire. Hull plates began to buckle as energy beams tore through the ship's armor. Alarms screamed throughout the bridge as systems failed one after another. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4, Murphy reported calmly. "Life support failing in the rear sections." Jake ignored the damage reports and focused on his targeting system. He had one chance to make this work. The fusion drives had to detonate at exactly the right moment to take out the flagship's main engines and stop its advance toward the mining station. 30 seconds to impact, Murphy announced. The Vorkanian commander's voice came over the radio one last time. Human ship, reverse course immediately. This is your final warning. Jake keyed his microphone for the last time. Sir, you made one critical error in your planning. What error? Jake looked at Captain Murphy, who nodded grimly. They both knew they were about to die, but 3,000 civilians would live because of their sacrifice. You forgot that humans do not surrender, Jake said. Ever. He triggered the fusion drive overload. The Liberty Dawn exploded like a miniature sun, its overloaded drives releasing the energy of a small nuclear weapon. The explosion tore through the Vorkanian flagship's forward sections, destroying the bridge and main engine compartments. The massive enemy ship lost power and began to drift, its momentum carrying it past the mining station instead of into it. Emergency systems activated throughout the flagship as surviving crew members tried to regain control of their crippled vessel. But it was too late. The Vorkanian fleet had lost its command ship and most of its combat capability. Damaged vessels began retreating toward the edge of the system, their crews too confused and frightened to continue the attack. Commander Zethkar watched the explosion from the bridge of the Star Wing. The bright flash of the Liberty Dawn's destruction lit up his view screen like a small star being born and dying in the same instant. By all the ancient stars, his weapons officer whispered. They actually did it. Zethkar stared at the drifting hulk of the Vorkanian flagship. 2 humans had just saved 3,000 lives by sacrificing their own. It was the most incredible act of courage he had ever witnessed, and the most terrifying. He was beginning to understand why humans were so dangerous. They did not fight for territory or resources or political advantage. They fought for each other, and when they fought for each other, they were willing to pay any price to win. The mining station was safe. The Vorkanian fleet was retreating, but Zethkar knew that everything had changed. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Neither would he. The medical bay of the Coalition hospital ship was quiet except for the steady beeping of life support monitors. Jake Collins lay unconscious in a healing chamber, his body covered in burns and radiation damage from the Liberty Dawn's explosion. Commander Zethkar stood beside the chamber, reading the medical reports on his datapad. The human had somehow survived the fusion drive explosion by ejecting in an emergency pod at the last possible second. His injuries were severe, but the doctor said he would recover. How is he? Came a familiar voice. Zethkar turned to see Captain Lisa Murphy walking into the medical bay. She moved slowly, supported by a walking stick, but she was alive. Like Jake, she had ejected from the Liberty Dawn moments before it exploded. The doctors say he will be fine, Zethkar replied, though he will be in the healing chamber for several more days. Murphy nodded and looked through the transparent walls of Jake's chamber. He saved a lot of lives today. You both did, Zethkar said quietly. But I am afraid not everyone sees it that way. Murphy raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Zethkar handed her his datapad. The screen showed news reports from across the galaxy. Headlines spoke of human brutality and savage warfare tactics. Political leaders from several species were demanding that humans be removed from the Coalition Defense Forces. They are calling your actions barbaric, Zethkar explained. The Alterian High Council says humans fight without honor. The Zenthan Assembly claims you violated every rule of civilized warfare. Murphy read through the reports with growing anger. We saved 3,000 civilian lives. How is that barbaric? Because you were willing to die to do it, Zethkar said. Other species cannot understand that kind of sacrifice. They see it as madness. Murphy looked at Jake's unconscious form in the healing chamber. Maybe they are right. Maybe we are mad. But those miners are alive because of our madness. Yes, Zethkar agreed, and that terrifies them. The medical bay doors opened and a group of high-ranking military officers entered. Murphy recognized some of them from news broadcasts. Admiral Kenthavar of the Zenthan Forces, General Mordak of the Carillion Fleet, Fleet Commander Yexhai of the Alterian Navy. Captain Murphy, Admiral Kenthavar said formally, you are to report for immediate disciplinary hearings regarding your actions during the Kepler Station incident. Murphy straightened, despite her injuries. What charges, sir? Violation of chain of command. Reckless endangerment of Coalition vessels. Use of excessive force against enemy combatants. The Admiral's voice was cold and official. The Coalition Council is considering your expulsion from the Defense Forces. Zethkar stepped forward. Admirals, I was the senior Coalition commander during that battle. If anyone should face charges, it should be me. Admiral Kenthavar looked at the Alterian officer with surprise. You, Commander, why? Because I failed to see what the humans saw. The Vorkanians were planning mass murder, and I was too blind to recognize it. Captain Murphy and Lieutenant Collins saved those civilians while I was preparing to surrender. General Mordak frowned. Are you defending their actions? I am stating facts, Zethkar replied firmly. Without human intervention, 3,000 miners would be dead right now. The Vorkanians never intended to follow prisoner protocols. They were using our own civilized nature against us. Fleet Commander Yexhai spoke up. Even if that is true, their methods were extreme. They destroyed enemy ships instead of disabling them. They fought with no regard for their own safety. Such tactics are dangerous. Murphy had heard enough. Dangerous to who, sir? Dangerous to the enemy who was about to commit mass murder? Or dangerous to your comfortable view of how wars should be fought? The officers looked shocked at her directness. Admiral Kenthavar stepped closer to Murphy. Captain, you are out of line. No, sir, I am being honest, Murphy replied. You want to punish us for fighting effectively. You want to condemn us for being willing to die for our principles. You call us barbaric because we do not follow your polite rules of engagement. Jake's eyes opened slowly in the healing chamber. He could hear voices but could not make out the words clearly. His body felt like it had been hit by a transport shuttle, but he was alive. More importantly, the medical sensors showed that the mining station was still intact. They had won. Jake activated the chamber's communication system with a weak hand gesture. His voice was barely a whisper, but everyone in the medical bay could hear him clearly. Captain Murphy is right, he said slowly. You call us barbaric because we are willing to fight and die for strangers. You think we are savage because we do not retreat when civilians are in danger. Admiral Kenthavar looked down at the injured human. Lieutenant, your actions violated every principle of civilized warfare. Jake managed a weak smile. Yes, sir, they did. And I would do it again tomorrow if it meant saving innocent lives. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Zethkar spoke up. Admirals, I am submitting my official report on the Kepler Station battle. In that report, I am recommending both Captain Murphy and Lieutenant Collins for the Coalition Medal of Valor. The officers looked at him in shock. General Mordak was the first to recover. Commander, you cannot be serious. I am completely serious, Zethkar replied. These humans showed us something important about ourselves. We have become so civilized that we forgot how to protect the innocent. We follow our rules even when the enemy breaks them. We fight politely even when lives are at stake. Zethkar looked at each of the senior officers in turn. The Vorkanians counted on our civilized nature. They knew we would surrender rather than risk casualties. They knew we would follow protocol even when protocol meant death for civilians. That is how civilized beings behave, Fleet Commander Yexhai protested. No, Zethkar said firmly. That is how cowards behave. Civilized beings protect the innocent no matter what the cost. Jake's voice came from the healing chamber again, stronger this time. Sirs, Earth Defense Command has asked Captain Murphy and me to return home for a new assignment. We have been ordered to establish a training program. Admiral Kenthavar frowned. What kind of training program? Murphy answered for Jake. Teaching other species how to fight like humans. How to win when losing means innocent people die. How to be willing to pay any price for victory when victory is the only option. The senior officers exchanged worried glances. The idea of spreading human combat tactics throughout the galaxy clearly frightened them. That would change everything, General Mordak said quietly. Jake nodded from his healing chamber. Yes, sir, it would. The question is whether you want to change or whether you want to keep losing battles because you are too polite to win them. 6 months later, Commander Zethkar stood on the observation deck of a Coalition training facility, watching human instructors teach alien cadets how to fight without rules. The students were learning to target critical systems instead of main hull sections. They were practicing aggressive tactics that ignored conventional safety margins. Most importantly, they were learning to fight with emotion instead of just logic. To care about the people they were protecting instead of just following orders. Jake Collins, fully recovered from his injuries, walked up beside Zethkar. What do you think, Commander? Zethkar watched a young Alterian cadet successfully disable a practice target, by hitting its power couplings instead of its shields. I think the galaxy is about to become a much more dangerous place for anyone who threatens civilians. Jake smiled. That was the idea. And much safer for everyone else, Zethkar added. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the next generation of coalition officers learn that sometimes the most civilized thing you can do is fight like a human.